You were not born to carry an invisible sentence on your shoulders. That idea might make you pause for a moment, as if someone just touched a wound you have endured for so long that you forgot it hurts. But the truth, simple and almost cruel, remains. The feeling of being inadequate, wrong, unworthy, never belonged to you. It was inserted into you, drop by drop, soaking into the early years of your life like a damp smell clinging to the walls of your mind. You never noticed when it began. You only realized that by the time you opened your eyes as an adult, your life was already running on a story that was not yours. The story that something about you was not right, that your existence had to shrink to fit a frame someone else placed around you. There are memories you do not want to revisit, yet they stay there, hidden in quiet moments that seem harmless. A slight frown from your mother when you were too excited. A casual remark from your father that girls should be gentle, quiet, and sweet. A random evening when you cried from exhaustion, and the adults responded with a tired sigh, as if your feelings were a burden. Those images are not enough to form a tragedy, but they are enough to form a shadow. That shadow grows through the years, through the reminders to be proper, to be calm, to keep everyone pleased. And one day, that shadow becomes inseparable from you, making you forget your original shape. When you were young, you laughed loudly, cried fiercely, and loved useless things with carefree joy. But as you grew up, you learned to fold your laughter small, swallow your tears, and hide your desires deep inside, as if they were evidence of wrongdoing. Each time you did that, you lost a piece of your essence, a layer of your true skin peeled away and replaced with one that fit other people's expectations. And while everything on the outside seemed calm, inside you, a quiet separation began to form. It did not explode or turn into storms. It spread gently like fog that made you feel blurry even in the moments that should have been the clearest. A compliment, an achievement, an effort recognized, all became faint because deep inside, you did not believe you deserved them. Then you grew up. You stepped into the world. You learned how to communicate, how to fit in, how to become someone pleasant. Your smile became a skill. Your silence became protection. You learned how to choose your words so no one would be offended, how to sense even the smallest sign of disapproval in someone's eyes. And slowly, you believed that this was your true personality. Gentle, reasonable, well-behaved. But those seemingly beautiful traits were sometimes ropes woven from shame. You did not realize when your hands became used to holding those ropes. You only knew that you were tired but could not say so. You wanted to be angry but felt afraid. You wanted closeness but withdrew by instinct. And that cycle kept repeating like an old song you did not like, but knew by heart. There are moments in the night when everything is quiet enough that you can hear your own heartbeat. When you sense a truth you cannot name, as if someone inside you is knocking gently on a door, asking for the right to speak. But you do not dare open it. You fear that opening it will force you to face something unbearable. That fear does not come from who you are. It comes from the old story planted in you long ago. The story that emotions are dangerous, that your true self is a problem, that your existence must be controlled, corrected, reshaped to fit. Shame does not appear like an explosion. It seeps in like water. It wears you down like cold wind. It is not strong enough to destroy you at once, but strong enough to make you doubt everything that moves inside you, to the point that you can no longer tell what is real emotion and what is a programmed response meant to avoid judgment. In the deepest moments you ask yourself, if I take off all these layers, what will remain? Will anyone still want to stay with me? These questions create the most solid prison, a prison without doors, only walls built from self-doubt. But if you look closely, you will see something strange. Those walls are not as thick as you think. They are made from scattered memories, borrowed beliefs, old sounds you still mistake for your inner voice. And when you touch them gently, you will see how fragile they truly are. The frightening part is not that the walls are too solid, but that you have lived inside them so long you forgot you are strong enough to walk out. Sometimes the truth does not arrive as an awakening. It arrives as a vague feeling that this life does not seem like yours, as if you are playing a role so tightly that you forget it is only a role. The gentle smiles that keep the peace, the safe words, the moments you lower yourself to avoid conflict, all become part of the mask. A mask worn so long that you think it is your real face, but your true self is still there, hidden in the fleeting look when you relax, hidden in the dreams that escape control. hidden in moments when you feel alive without knowing why. The beginning of this journey does not ask you to break anything. It does not require you to change right away. It only invites you to do one thing. Stop. Stop long enough to see that your distorted sense of self is not proof of a flaw, but the trace of a story someone else once wrote for you. When you realize that, you do not need to rebel yet. You only need to breathe. You only need to know that everything begins here, where you first question the shadow that has followed you for so many years. And from that question, the journey home can finally begin. You grew up with the feeling that something in you always needed to be adjusted. But if you look more closely at the culture that has shaped generations, you will see that feeling was never accidental. People are taught to be obedient before they are taught to be free, taught to be good before they are taught how to exist. No one says this directly. It is passed down through rules that seem harmless, moral lessons that sound reasonable, compliments that only appear when you are pleasant and compliant. At some point, everything vibrant in you was seen as something to restrain, while quietness became the standard of a good person. In families that seem ordinary, children learn very early that order matters more than truth. A child who laughs too loudly is told to be quiet. A child who feels too deeply is told not to exaggerate. These gentle reminders take root with surprising depth, and when you step out into the world, you see the same message reflected everywhere in the polished mirrors of society. Fix yourself. Beauty standards tell you your body is not enough. Success standards tell you your effort is not enough. The way people display their lives online makes it seem like everything must be perfect to be worth sharing. And you begin to see yourself as an unfinished project that will never be complete. There are mornings when you look in the mirror and see nothing wrong, yet you still feel an undefined lack. Not because you are lacking, but because you were taught to ask yourself those questions. This is the consequence of a society built on comparison as naturally as breathing. Instead of asking, "Who am I?" people learn to ask, "What am I missing?" Those questions turn shame into a habit and self-doubt into a reflex, as natural as blinking. The pieces that create such feelings are so small that they are hard to notice. A joke about your appearance. A moment when your emotions were called too much. A time when you wanted something and were told you were selfish. Each memory is like a speck of dust. They do not hurt when they appear, but when they accumulate, they form a thin layer that makes you see the world through a fogged window. The hardest part is that you no longer know which breath is yours and which echo belongs to generations before you. By the time you become an adult, you believe you are living by your own choices. But if you look closely, many choices come more from the fear of judgment than from genuine desire. The caution in your words, the restraint in your actions, the effort to avoid causing even the slightest discomfort in others, all come from the dust of old lessons. Anyone raised in an environment that glorifies proper behavior carries an invisible map where almost every path to peace requires becoming smaller. What makes that dust so persistent is the way it becomes internalized. You no longer need someone standing in front of you to remind you. The voices from the past continue to echo in your mind, even when the people who created them are long gone. A parent's sternness, another child's mockery, an adult's judgment, all blend into a familiar sound you mistake for your own voice. You are no longer sure when you are following old instructions and when you are listening to your true self. A strange thing happens when people live too long inside this mold. They forget how to feel the things that once made them feel alive. Joy becomes rare. Strong desires are restrained before they have a chance to form. You might perform well, behave well, get along with everyone, yet still feel a part of you has never been touched, as if the life inside you happens only in a small room, while the rest of the world is just a stage where you perform the safest version of yourself. The one thing that keeps this structure from locking you in completely is a light but real sensation that appears in unexpected moments. When you see someone dare to say what you have been scared to say, when you hear a story about someone living fully as themselves, when an image awakens something in your heart you thought was lost, those moments are like streaks of light across the fogged window, reminding you that your true self has not disappeared. It is simply waiting to be seen. No one needs to tear down their world in a day to understand this. You only need to realize that shrinking yourself is not your nature, but a learned habit. You only need to see that the rules that silenced you are not truths, but the legacy of a time that shaped people into shadows meant to fit a mold. When you see this, something gentle shifts inside. Not rebellion, not enlightenment. Just a small, quiet space in your mind where you begin to wonder whether there might be another way to live. And from that quiet space, a thin door opens. It does not lead to destruction. It leads to listening. It does not force you to change immediately. It allows you to look at yourself with new curiosity. You begin to see that the things that once made you feel ashamed may not be flaws, but hidden traces covered for too long. And in that fragile awareness, the most important part of the journey ahead begins to form. The need to reach the deepest layer of your being, the place where shame was never born but only placed there. This is the starting point of another chapter, waiting to unfold beneath the mask you have worn for far too long. There are moments you never say out loud, yet you feel them clearly in your body. Like when you are smiling at the right time, bowing at the right moment, nodding at the right rhythm, then suddenly noticing that there was no inner agreement at all. A chill runs through your ribs, light but sharp, leaving you confused about why something as simple as a smile can make you feel so disconnected. That feeling is not a sign of weakness. It is proof that two versions of you are living side by side, the one trained to be pleasant and the one locked away in the shadows behind it. It is hard to remember when you first began creating different versions of yourself. Maybe it was one afternoon when you were criticized for being too honest, or the moment you were made to feel ashamed simply for expressing real anger. From those small fragments, you learned that to be safe, you had to hold parts of yourself back. And over the years, you collected an entire wardrobe of masks, each one matching a role. The obedient version to keep your parents calm, the funny version to keep your friends comfortable, the gentle version to keep a lover from leaving. No one told you to do this. You did it anyway, as if you instinctively understood that being real could lead to a wound you were not strong enough to face. There are nights when you return home, close the door, and feel all the energy drained from your body. Not because of work, not because of long conversations, but because you spent the whole day guarding every emotion, every breath, every gesture, so you would not be seen as too much. This kind of exhaustion is not loud. It does not burst into tears. It just sits in silence, like a thin layer of lead on your chest. You know it is there, yet you do not know where to begin removing it. Many people once believed that this was simply their personality, that they naturally disliked loudness, disliked asking for things, disliked opening up. But if you are honest, you will see that behind that quietness lives a fever being held down. The fire from every time you wanted to say something true but chose silence instead. The fire from every time you wanted to leave a relationship that made you smaller but forced yourself to stay a little longer. Each time you stepped back, you extinguished a spark inside you. And after repeating that for years, you began to think you were a person without fire. It turns out the child you once were is still alive inside you, never gone. It only learned to hide in a corner, not because it was bad or weak, but because it was once treated as trouble. When you smile to avoid conflict, it is the child who is forced to stay silent. When you swallow your tears to avoid making someone uncomfortable, it is the child who is left behind. When you put others first to keep the peace, it is the child who is rejected. And over time, the room where it hides becomes so small, it can hardly breathe. The frightening thing is that the mask does not only hide your feelings, it hides your ability to be seen. You can be surrounded by people, talking, laughing, working, appearing fine, yet still feel detached. That detachment does not come from anyone outside. It comes from the fact that you have never allowed anyone to reach the truest part of you. Others cannot see you because you have turned yourself into a safe silhouette. And each time you do that, a small question rises inside you, soft but sharp. If they only love this version, who will love the rest of me? In the rare moments you allow yourself to pause, you might feel a gentle movement inside, as if the mask has faded a little. As if your body has begun to reject the idea of pretending so perfectly. In that moment, you do not clearly see what is changing. You only feel a longing for a more honest conversation, a more genuine embrace, a small action done without the fear of inconvenience. You long to live without adjusting yourself every second. That longing for life often confuses you, not because you do not want it, but because you are not sure whether you have the right to ask for it. as if an unspoken rule from the past is still holding you back. Do not cause trouble, do not disappoint anyone, do not make others uncomfortable. These rules once helped you survive the environment where shrinking yourself was necessary. But as an adult, they became invisible chains that keep you from taking even one step toward your real self. If you have read this far and feel something in these lines that resembles something that has been quietly resting inside you for many years, you can leave a small comment, just to acknowledge that something is moving within you. When you recognize yourself in this story, that alone is a bigger step than you think. And if you want to stay longer on this journey, the follow button will keep us in the same rhythm, not because of the algorithm, but because the deeper layers ahead need companionship. True change does not come from a sudden awakening. It comes from growing tired of living the wrong size, tired of holding yourself tight, tired of protecting a version that has drifted too far from who you are, tired enough to begin wondering if life could be lived differently. The moment that question appears, the structure you built over many years gently trembles, not to collapse, but to show you that it was never as solid as you believed. And from that trembling, a small door opens in the dark. There is no bright light. There is no promise. Only a path leading toward the deepest place where you once abandoned yourself. This is not liberation. This is simply the moment you begin to hear the faint sound of your true self, a sound buried beneath years of pretending to be strong. And from that sound, the next part of your journey will slowly take shape. There are moments in life when you feel a shift you cannot name, not from the outside world, but from somewhere deep within. As if a long closed door suddenly opens a tiny crack, just enough for you to sense a vast space behind it that you never knew existed. You do not step in right away, yet the presence of that door makes everything that once felt familiar suddenly lose its certainty. The silence you used to choose for the sake of harmony begins to feel unreasonable. The shrinking you once believed was safe starts to feel cramped. The rules you once thought were truths begin to look like old shapes handed down from too many generations. When you look closely, you notice something strange. Your life is built from two different layers. The outer layer is made of habits, polite, proper, controlled. The inner layer is a hidden land where emotions are pushed down, old wounds are covered, and true desires are forced into silence. Not because they are wrong, but because they once made someone uncomfortable, once made someone leave, once created a fracture you could not bear. To survive, you learn to keep your face still, and when the face becomes too still, the soul begins to break into pieces. This separation did not happen in a single day. It happened in moments when you told yourself it is fine, even when you were clearly hurting. When you smiled to avoid hearing the question, "Are you okay?" When you took a deep breath and swallowed the words you wanted to speak. After each moment like that, a thin layer of your true self was coated with the white powder of silence, until you no longer remembered what your original state felt like. At that point, the silence in your heart was no longer a choice, but a landscape. But beneath those layers, a gentle resistance still exists. It is not loud, not destructive. It simply makes you feel tired in a very specific way. Tired of holding yourself together. Tired of trying to be in the right place at the right time. Tired of controlling yourself so tightly that you can no longer hear your true inner voice. Sometimes it appears as a passing question. Why do small things hurt this much? Why am I so afraid of disappointing others? Why does being real feel dangerous? If you dare to stay still a little longer, you will see something else moving beneath those questions. An old calling from the part of your soul you once forced into sleep. Not a cry for help, but a reminder that something has not been resolved. The dark space inside you does not only contain pain, it contains memories that have been frozen. The day you were mocked for being brave, the day you were dismissed for being sensitive, the day you needed to be held but heard, be strong instead. These moments do not fade with time. They only step into the shadows and wait for the day you are quiet enough to see them again. Many people think they must be strong to enter that darkness. The truth is, it is the exhaustion that opens the way. When you are too tired to keep pretending, you begin to loosen your grip. And in that softness, something strange happens. You stop fighting the pain and begin allowing it to speak. Not to sink into sorrow, but to understand the story that made you shrink in the first place. That story is not always tragic. Often, it is a long chain of misunderstandings. A child thinks they were left alone because they were not good enough, when the truth is the adults did not know how to be present. A child thinks their emotions were a burden, when the adults simply lack the capacity to hold them. A child believes they must be good to be loved, when the love they needed was never expressed in the right way. When adults carry wounds, they leave marks on the hands of the children they touch. And the child, by instinct, always assumes the fault is their own. You carry marks like that without noticing. They do not appear as clear memories, but as patterns in your reactions. You stay silent when you are sad, because you were taught that sadness is heavy. You smile when you are hurt, because you were taught that hurt is too noisy. You withdraw from relationships when you need too much, because you were taught that wanting is selfish. These reactions do not belong to the adult you are now. They belong to the child inside, who is still searching for safety. Seeing this does not turn you into a different person overnight, but it shifts the ground beneath your feet. Instead of holding on to the perfect shell, you begin to feel the small cracks in it. Not to break it, but to understand that you no longer need to cling to it. Truth gains power when it is seen clearly, and the truth is waiting for you, not to wound you, but to return the pieces you lost. There is a very private moment when you first touch this deeper layer of yourself. It is not a shock. It is like the long-held sigh you finally release. A breath that lowers your shoulders a little. A breath that makes you realize how many things you have carried that were never yours. A breath that helps you see that the emptiness you felt was not the absence of worth, but the distance from the place that once nurtured your true being. From that place, you do not need to run. You only need to walk more slowly. You might feel your body lighten slightly when you no longer force the smile. You might feel your heart beat deeper when you stop hiding your exhaustion. You might begin to understand that what you once saw as weakness is simply unacknowledged humanity. And when humanity is met with gentleness, it opens doors you did not know you could touch. No one taught you this when you were a child. Truth does not break you. Truth only removes the extra layers that kept you from recognizing your original shape. And in the darkness you once avoided, something else has been waiting for many years. A small, steady light, quiet, patient. That light is the part of you left behind. The part no one ever embraced properly. Yet it has waited for your return with unwavering patience. From here, the journey will no longer be the same, not because you found the answers, but because you have begun to hear your own voice, the voice that has been drowned for so many years by the fear of living honestly. That voice is both fragile and resilient, and if you keep listening, it will guide you deeper into the memories you buried, so your true self can finally return after being forgotten for far too long. There are days when you suddenly realize that most of what you believe about yourself does not truly belong to you. They are like old objects someone placed in your hands when you were young. And because you did not know how to refuse, you kept carrying them until now. You carry standards you never chose, fears you never created, limits that do not come from your body or your soul, but from others, people who once said something powerful enough to become a rule in your life. When you look back, you see that you've been living as if an invisible council existed inside you, always judging, always watching, always whispering that you must stay restrained if you want to be loved. These voices are not in the room. They have no clear faces, yet their presence is as sharp as a blade. Some sound like your parents. Some sound like your teachers. Some sound like people who passed through your life too briefly to understand you, yet long enough for you to never forget them. They left behind phrases like, "Do not be selfish. Do not make others uncomfortable. Do not overreact. Do not fail." No one intended to plant seeds that would make you live cautiously for a lifetime, but the seeds grew. They do not require care. A long silence inside your mind is enough for them to spread into a dense forest. What is hard to notice is that these voices no longer sound like commands. They have turned into a kind of false intuition, a constant alertness that makes you adjust yourself before anyone has the chance to judge you. You pull back your words when you feel you are about to be too honest. You suppress your desires because you fear looking greedy. You stay quiet when you hurt because you think you are being a burden. You judge yourself endlessly because you think that if you relax, everything will fall apart. Yet all of this is nothing more than learned reflex, not the truth of who you are today. If you observe carefully, you will see these reflexes follow a fixed pattern. Whenever you are about to break free from the mold, a vague anxiety pulls you back, as if there are shadows inside you whose job is to sound the alarm whenever you try to live differently. These shadows are not malicious. They were created to protect you from old wounds. but they have never updated over time. While you grew older, changed environments, changed relationships, these shadows continued behaving as if you were still the child who got scolded simply for being too real. The strange thing is that everything around you has changed, yet these shadows still serve the same purpose, keeping you small. At some point, you begin to wonder whether these limits truly belong to you. This question is not rebellion. It is like standing in a room so familiar, it becomes dull. Then suddenly noticing the right wall is not a real wall, but a wooden panel placed there long ago. You touch it gently, and it trembles. That tiny movement is enough to make your entire world feel different. Not because you want to tear it down, but because for the first time you know it might not be destiny. When you look at these false walls, you see they are built from layers. One layer is old taboos passed down through generations. One layer is the feeling of owing something even when you did nothing wrong. One layer is the fear of being different. One layer is the need to be accepted at any cost. As each layer becomes visible, you begin to see clearly that beneath them is not emptiness, but a larger space where the questions about your true nature can finally be asked. You once believed that breaking your old beliefs would make you lost, but standing near them brings a strange lightness, not because you want to erase everything, but because you realize many of those beliefs never served you. Some beliefs make you responsible, yet strangle your need to breathe. Some beliefs make you safe, yet take away your aliveness. Some beliefs make you exist in the eyes of others, yet make you disappear in your own. Then, in a very quiet moment, you ask yourself whether you could live by values you choose consciously instead of the ones placed on your shoulders in childhood. When that question appears, the air around you feels different. You stop seeing your beliefs as absolute truths and begin seeing them as objects you can set down, pick up, examine, choose again. It feels like entering an old house, opening the windows wide, and realizing the musty smell never belonged to the walls, but to the lack of light. Many people fear this feeling because they think it will lead them into chaos. But what waits for you is not chaos, but the ability to question. When you look back at the things that made you bow your head, you no longer see them as laws, but as remnants of a time when you were too young to understand. And when you are old enough to recognize that origin, the beliefs that once chained you suddenly lose their weight. What matters is not destroying everything. What matters is allowing yourself to ask, does this belief help me live closer to my truth, or only closer to the expectations of others? Some things you will keep because they still feel right. Some things you will put down because they have grown old. And some things you will have to look at for a long time before knowing where they belong. Change does not arrive loudly. It begins with the simple awareness that the rules you are living by are not unchangeable. When you see that you have the right to rewrite them even a little, you step across a line you once believed was absolute. There is no dramatic sound, only a new space opening where the storage of old judgments used to be. In that space, you feel something very subtle. Not everything you fear is true. From here, you begin to see that where you stand is no longer surrounded by rigid walls. The space around you expands, not to erase the past, but to allow your true self to breathe. And in that openness, another movement begins. A movement leading you back to the deepest place where the inner child has been waiting for you after all these years. This is the moment you prepare to enter the part of your memory you have long avoided, not to relive the pain, but to gather the pieces that broke away from you, the pieces that hold the key to the wholeness you were made to forget. There is a place inside you have not dared to step into for a long time, not because it is dangerous, but because it holds the things you once believed you had already overcome. Yet everything that has never been faced still remains there, untouched, exactly as it was on the first day. When you close your eyes, you can feel its presence like a thin breath of cold air, a coldness not born from despair, but from a room that has been locked for far too long. That room is not completely dark. It is simply missing someone who is willing to walk in. And in the deepest corner of that room lies something very few people dare to face, the child you once were. It does not look like the images you see in healing books. It does not smile at you. It does not run into your arms. It stands there, with its shoulders curled in, its hands clenched, its eyes unsure, as if it does not know whether you truly want to meet it or are only passing by. That feeling makes your throat tighten, Because no one ever warned you that the hardest part of returning to yourself is facing that small being, the one who endured everything you spent your whole life trying to forget. The things you fear most are not the events themselves, but the possibility that you were not loved in the right way, not because you were wrong, but because the people who were supposed to love you carried too many wounds of their own. The child inside you once searched the faces of adults for confirmation that it mattered, but when all it received were tired looks, cold tones, or judgment, it formed a conclusion, simple and cruel: the flaw must be mine. From that moment, you began building a survival structure that has now become part of your adult personality. When a child feels like a burden, it learns to stay quiet. When it thinks its emotions are troublesome, it learns to swallow every tremble. When it believes love comes from being good, it learns to control every breath. And when you grow up, you carry these survival skills with you as if they were natural reflexes, not because they are still useful, but because no one ever told you that you could live another way. If you listen carefully, you will hear that child echo through your daily life, not through words, but through sensations. It appears in the anxiety you feel when someone stays silent too long, in the panic that rises when you accidentally speak too honestly, in the emptiness after achieving something important and still feeling nothing. Each sensation is a signal from a part of you that never grew because it was never seen. As you walk closer to it, you may feel your own body tremble. Because this place holds not only memories, but the words you once heard that still shape you today. Soft reminders that became chains, casual comments that became definitions, things adults said without thinking that became lifelong rules. Each one etched into the child's heart like small dry marks that never fade. The hardest part is not remembering the memories. The hardest part is realizing how much you once believed them. You believed you were too much. You believed you were troublesome. You believed you had to earn love to deserve it. And because you believed these things, you grew into someone who did not reflect your true nature. You became quieter, softer, smaller, not because that is who you are, but because you feared that living honestly would make someone leave. It hurts to see this truth, yet this pain is the doorway to what you lost for too long: the ability to love yourself without conditions. When you stand before that child long enough, you will notice it does not ask for anything complicated. It only wants to be seen. It wants its pain to be acknowledged as real. It wants to know it was never the cause of anyone's exhaustion. It wants someone, for the first time, to tell it that its feelings were never meant to be hidden. When you do that, even in silence, the room inside you begins to change. The air becomes warmer, as if light has found a way to enter a space that once stayed sealed. You may think returning to the past will make you weaker, but the truth usually works the other way. Each time you allow that child to speak, you reclaim a piece of strength you once lost. The strength of sensitivity, once seen as a burden. The strength of vulnerability, once labeled as weakness. The strength of honesty, once dismissed as trouble. Everything that once silenced you now becomes the very thing that reconnects you to yourself at the deepest level. Then a very special moment appears, one that no one can describe clearly, yet everyone recognizes when it happens. It is when you sit in stillness and feel as if someone gently places a hand on your heart, soft but enough to remind you that your life force is still intact. That moment is not full liberation. It is like hearing your own footsteps echo for the first time in a room that used to be too dark. You realize you are no longer trapped the way you once were, not because someone opened the door, but because you finally turned around and looked at the place you feared most. From that point, part of the story changes, not because the pain disappears, but because it is no longer something you must run from. The child inside you, after being abandoned for so many years, begins stepping out slowly. It does not run to you immediately. It watches to see whether you truly intend to stay. And for the first time in your life, you have the chance to tell it what no one ever did: I will not leave. Just one sentence like that is enough to soften even the thickest walls inside you. From here, the path will lead you out of that room, not through force, but through tender patience. Because when the child within you is acknowledged, it no longer needs to hide. And when it no longer needs to hide, you can finally walk into the world in your true shape, a shape that was never wrong, only untouched by loving eyes. This return does not end here. It opens another bright space where you begin not only to heal the past, but to rewrite your future with a voice that feels completely your own. There are moments when you realize your life has been made smaller by things that never belonged to you. All those years, trying to be pleasant, lovable, easy to be around, undemanding, taught you how to live as if standing on your tiptoes. But when you are calm enough to look back, you know the exhaustion never came from living. It came from living in a shape that was not yours, as if you had been wearing an outfit tailored for someone else, and simply because it was not too tight or too loose, you let it dictate your every movement. The truth is, no one entered your life with the mission of making you doubt yourself. They only repeated what they once learned. That love must come with conditions, that showing emotion is weakness, that wanting is selfish, that silence is wise, that sacrifice is proof of worth. When these teachings pass from one generation to the next, they become unwritten rules. And you, like many others, carried them without knowing they were created to protect someone, but not to protect you. But now, standing near the end of this part of your journey, you no longer see those rules with the eyes of a child. You see them with the eyes of someone who has lived enough, been hurt enough, and awakened enough. You see that their strength never came from being true, but only from being familiar. And what is familiar, no matter how binding, is still just a habit, something that can be undone piece by piece. In the quiet of your own being, you begin to understand something you avoided admitting for many years. Any love that requires the erosion of your essence is not love worth keeping. No relationship is sacred if it forces you to hide the most beautiful, honest, alive parts of your heart. No acceptance has real value if the price is abandoning yourself. And when you acknowledge this, a new light opens, a light you once believed you would never touch. That light does not lead you into rebellion. It leads you into clarity. Clarity that you have the right to express your needs without treating them as crimes. Clarity that you have the right to feel sadness, anger, and weakness without labeling them as flaws. Clarity that you can fail without becoming less worthy. Clarity that you do not need to shrink to fit anyone, not even the people you love the most. This clarity is the beginning of freedom. The surprising thing is, freedom does not arrive with a roar. It comes like wind brushing gently against a window on a quiet morning. You feel it through small movements, a sincere sentence spoken without checking someone's reaction, a decision made from your own needs instead of outside expectations, a moment when you dare to say, I want or I do not want. These things seem insignificant, but to someone who lived in fear of judgment, they are a silent revolution. When you speak these words, the child inside you lifts its head. It looks at you not with suspicion, but with a new kind of trust. It sees that you are finally here to guide it, not push it down. And as it steps toward you, you feel the connection between two parts that were separated for far too long. Not full harmony, but a first touch, at the right place, at the right time. From that touch, you begin to feel your life differently. You no longer just observe yourself. You inhabit each moment. You no longer treat yourself as a project in need of repair. You see yourself as a living being, learning how to exist for the first time. You no longer let the old voices lead you. You hear the true voice rising from deep in your chest. And that voice does not demand, does not judge, does not ask you to be perfect. It says only one thing: live as if this life belongs to you. People often think returning to the true self is a stillness, but it is not still. It is a constant movement, a repeated decision to choose yourself in the smallest choices, a patience for ancient moments of fear, a tenderness for the parts that have not grown up, an honesty toward the instincts asking to be acknowledged. Here, you no longer need to proclaim anything loudly, but if there is one sentence you whisper into your own silence, it might be simple. I am no longer living by the story someone else wrote. And when that sentence rises, your inner world shifts gently. Shame does not vanish, but it loses its authority. Fear does not disappear, but it steps back. The relationship between you and yourself begins to rewrite itself on a new foundation, where truth is no longer a threat, but the thing that makes you whole. This journey does not end with a triumphant victory. It ends with the quiet peace of a heart returning to its own chest. You walk through many dark places, many layers of memory, many old faces, only to discover that the one you have been searching for was never out there. They were hidden in the part of you you thought you needed to hide. That person is not perfect, not invincible, not always strong, But that person is real. And as you stand at the doorway of that truth, you understand that life from here on will be different. Not because everything becomes easier, but because the one stepping into it has changed. Some days you will be strong. Some days you will falter. But you will no longer abandon yourself. And that is the one gift no one but you can give. If there is one image to close this journey, it is the image of a person standing in the soft light of a late afternoon, aware of their scars, aware they still have much to learn, yet no longer bowing to the past. In that quiet light, you can hear clearly a timeless sentence rising in your heart. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be real. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.